I don't know any other country as Ukraine who had such a dramatic and challenging path to the European Union.
And the EU has reconfirmed its adherence to the goal why it was created.
We must keep reminding that the European project won't be complete without the continent's largest state, which is Ukraine.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course, and I'm your host, Myroslava Yaremkiv. On December 13th, the European Council decided to start negotiations on the accession of Ukraine and Moldova to the European Union. This stage is the penultimate one before joining the EU. Then there will be a procedure for preparing the formalities for accepting countries into the Union. This is indeed a historic event. But it does not mean at all that Ukraine will become a full-fledged member of the EU. Negotiations can last for years. One of the vivid examples is Turkey, which has been in the process for almost 20 years, however, only because of internal political issues. In today's episode, we're going to talk about this important symbolic step for Ukraine, the negotiation process itself, and explore the necessary steps Ukraine must take to draw closer to EU membership. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. Now, Kyiv and Brussels have to build a negotiation framework that will determine the procedure for the opening negotiations. According to optimistic forecasts, it should be approved as early as March 2024. But before that, Ukraine must fulfill all the recommendations of the European Commission, which it indicated in the November report on enlargement. Only one of them still remains unfulfilled, on the regulation of lobbying activities. The relevant draft law is now registered in the Ukrainian parliament. Over the years, Ukraine has had to harmonize its legislation with European legislation. This applies to procurement, corporate law, monetary policy, judiciary and law enforcement, anti-corruption, etc. Former General Director of the Governmental Office on European Integration and NATO, Nataliya Forsyuk, will talk more about all the work ahead for both Ukraine and the European Union.
First of all, I would like to congratulate us all with this decision of European Council to open accession negotiations with Ukraine. I also would like to congratulate our friends from Moldova and obviously Georgia, because they are also one step closer to the European family, which is a very strong signal to Russian Federation, who would like to keep the influence on these countries as well as an influence on Ukrainian territory. So now we all hope that negotiations will start within the couple of months, but that means that there is a lot of homework to be done, both for Ukraine and for the European Union. For Ukraine, this is very obvious. We have to not only align our acquis, but actually implement all this into our everyday life on all levels and prove that it's working. However, we also have to protect the national interests and the interests of our businesses in order to keep strong national economy while being already a member of EU. But there is another part of an exercise. It's political exercise, and this political exercise will be also not only on Ukrainian side, it will also be on the side of European Union. As we all saw on Thursday, until the last moment we were not sure whether the decision to open accession negotiations will be taken and how it will be taken, because there are few leaders of some member states that still keep very strong and I would say friendly relationships with Russian Federation, trying to block the accession process of Ukraine into the European Union. And this means that there is a need of changes in some procedures of the European Union. And this will be hard work, obviously, for the European politicians and member states, because very important decisions, not only related to Ukraine, but also to other future destiny worth decision of the European Union could not be blocked by one country. And this means that a lot of work should be done to find the way to change the procedures, to improve the procedures and support democratic values within the EU, not only allowing Ukraine or Moldova or Georgia or Bosnia to join, but also in other important areas of life. I don't know any other country as Ukraine who had such a dramatic and challenging path to the European Union. And we all see that Russian Federation is using all possible sources to influence this decision. For example, they use the war fatigue technique very well. After Maidan, when they invaded east of Ukraine, almost a year after, everyone stopped talking about this because the world was tired of this war topic. And this encouraged Russia to go further with the full-scale war almost 2 years ago. And we also, this last few months, how successfully they were using these techniques in different levels, in different countries, not only within the EU countries, but also on other continents.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban confirmed that he abstained from voting at the EU Leaders' Summit regarding the start of negotiations on Ukraine's accession, calling such a move by the EU a bad decision. Hungary's position is clear. Ukraine is not ready to start negotiations on EU membership, he said, calling the decision to start negotiations irrational and senseless. Orban also opposes EU sanctions on Russian oil and gas and refuses to allow EU or NATO military aid to enter Ukraine. He believes that the supply of weapons to Kyiv only prolongs the agony. More on Hungarian political blackmail of Ukraine's path to the EU, please welcome Chair of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Ukraine's integration into the European Union, Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze.
The European Council has taken a historic decision of opening the accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova, of granting the candidate status to Georgia, and definitely it was a historic and victorious day for all of our nations. But it was also historic and victorious for the EU itself and for member states, because finally, again, the values have won, and the EU has reconfirmed its adherence to the goal why it was created. And again, the autocracies have lost their illusions that everything could be bought or sold. That was a great day of victory of values over interests. But at the same time, during these discussions and deliberations on the decision, we have seen how one of the countries was trying to take the whole future of the continent hostage. And we should not have any illusions that that was not the last blackmail of Prime Minister Orban. And he is driven not only by his dependencies on Moscow. He is driving his blackmail because he also wants to preserve its status and its rule within Hungary. By the way, not everyone there is happy with this type of rule. And then he also wants to preserve its influence within the EU. He actually even mentioned that he wants to take over Brussels. So yesterday or a day before yesterday, we saw how he was blackmailing Europe with Ukraine. Tomorrow, he'll find other things to blackmail Europe with, like European security. And I think that that means that this problem has to be addressed really in systemic way. And we have to find the safeguard in order to ensure that such vestige of autocracies does not have any future in European Union. We are definitely already in the epoch of turbulence. And some even people think that we are already witnessing the third world war, or even fourth one after the end of the Cold War. I do hope that we will not witness anything of a nuclear conflict between nuclear states, or even a great conventional war between nuclear states. But we definitely are already seeing a lot of different military and hybrid conflicts across the globe. Yalta Potsdam world, with its division on spheres of influence, actually has ended when the Cold War came to an end. But at that point, nothing new, no new system, and no new approach was suggested. And so that's why we are seeing the situation of today. Autocracies have decided to announce the war against democratic part of the world. In order to win in this geopolitical competition, we definitely have to be driven by a policy of values of 21st century, not by realpolitik of the 19th century. And we have to understand that values cannot be traded for interests. If, for example, the world has reacted appropriately to the attack of Russian Federation over Georgia, or if the world had not pretended that it doesn't really see the annexation of Crimea and parts of the eastern Ukraine by the Russian Federation, then the big the big war of 2022, the full-scale invasion, could have been stopped. What will be the next problem? What will be the next war? What will be the next conflict? We already see what is happening in the Middle East, but next could be Taiwan, could be South Korea, could be anywhere. So right now, in order to win in this battle, we have to stick together. And we believe that the EU needs Ukraine as much as Ukraine needs the EU.
The situation is complicated by the fact that no one knows what the European Union will be like even a few years, let alone in 2030. In recent years, very complex and contradictory processes have been observed there. And we must understand that if we do join the EU in any foreseeable future, we will not join the Union to which we paved the way decades ago. Over the years, Europe has become weaker, more conflicted, in some cases less democratic and less economically efficient. Director of the Institute of World Politics, Yevhen Mahda, will share his realistic insights about the EU accession process that awaits Ukraine in the future.
In my opinion, the European Council's decision to start negotiations on the accession of Ukraine and Moldova to the European Union, and granting Georgia the status of a candidate for accession to the European Union, should be viewed purely instrumentally. Yes, it is really a victory for all of us. But at the same time, we must be quite clear about the pros and cons that exist today. First of all, this process will be quite long, and it depends very seriously on our internal changes. We must use the next 6 months, when the elections to the European Parliament will unfold, to demonstrate Ukraine's effectiveness and commitment to European principles. We must keep reminding that the European project won't be complete without the continent's largest state, which is Ukraine, and we must speak about it loudly enough. We must speak about it with one voice. We must speak with joint efforts. European integration must become our common idea. We must also understand that the beginning of negotiations on Ukraine's succession to the European Union is not an indulgence. In fact, they give us a set of tools and materials to make our own vehicle to drive to the European Union. They can advise us, they can help us, but no one will do this work for us. We must be aware of it. We need a consolidating European idea that unites millions of our citizens. Those who defend Ukraine at the front and those who live and work at the rear and must implement European standards. We are Europeans, and no one in the old world should have any doubts about this. But we must also be realistic, because these are also European approaches. If anyone thinks that we can always use only favorable conjunction or always rely on some ephemeral hopes, it isn't so. We have to optimize the policy towards our Central European neighbors. We need a clear roadmap for European transformations. We must move towards the European Union by changing our legislation and optimizing the European Union legislation to our requirements. To my mind, we'll be ready to join the European Union when there will be adequate Eurosceptics in Ukraine who will say that we don't need to rush certain issues because we may lose our positions. We must move towards Europe with dignity, because our impetus for European integration was the revolution of dignity. We shouldn't forget about it.
You've been watching a special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!